have this link. And I think that, Jake, so that you're aware of, I'm going to post this on my public profile, because what's happening now is we're doing trainings like this, like it with Gene Rivers. And if you were one of the unfortunate ones that registered, but Zoom cut me off at 300, I so apologize to you. I got so many emails. And so what we're going to do with all the training is I'm going to record it, and then I'm going to post it up to my public profile with any collateral that a teacher gives us, so that you could go. I've got 2 Facebook pages because like I'm at that 5,000 limit. And so I have to kick people off that. When I want to accept a new friend, I have to kick somebody off that I'm like, I don't think I know this person. So, so anyways, if you could go to my public page, I will post this recording there. If you've got friends to do this, in fact, I'm going to tell team leaders. I have a role play conversation with KW team leaders tomorrow, and I'm going to encourage them to take that content and take this content and do a watch party, because you could actually do a watch party, share your screen on a Zoom, and have your own private classes with it. And any content that we put out there, do a watch party off of it. So does that make sense to everybody?
Yes.
So my name is on here and it's spelled correctly. I did get it correct this morning. I spelled my name, Jake. And so you can find, I've got 2 Facebook pages. One is just my personal one, which if I kick some people off, you feel free to friend me there. But more importantly, go like the public one. And what I'm going to do through this whole next several weeks is I'm going to let that be exclusive for mindset and any kind of Keller Williams trainings that I do that are appropriate for all agents. Is that okay? Because if it's not, I'm doing it anyway, and it'd be just kind of weird. And I don't want Angela Thompson going nuts on me or anything like that. So, all right, I got Karen King to give me a thumbs up. That's awesome. I didn't know that you could do that. I guess that's that reactions button. So, all right. So, hey, listen, I really appreciate Jake, who's a master teacher, constantly and consistently standing up saying, let me add value to our people right now. And so we've got 58 people, 59 people on this particular Zoom. Yeah, Jake is going to be talking about, last 2 days, I was on a day and a half Zoom calls with Gary Keller and regional directors. And it's very real possibility. We're not in a recession now. Recession means you have 2 back-to-back quarters where it goes down. We're not in a recession, but I'm going to guess by the end of the year, we will be in a recession, if not worse. Mm-hmm. We're going to plan for the worst, hope for the best. I don't think it's going to be as bad as Gary. I respectfully don't agree with Gary, and this is a recorded call. I respectfully disagree with him. He is preparing us all and to help you prepare for the absolute worst case scenario. But here's the fun thing: in the absolute worst case scenario, full on depression, people still buy and sell real estate. They still need a place to live. And so we just have to be wise as serpents and gentle as doves, right? Is that okay?
Yep.
Man, Steve, I don't know where you are, my friend, but I want to be wherever you are. I see the wind. It's funny because I see the wind blowing in the palm trees behind you, but your hair is not moving. So either you have like a gob of hairspray on, my friend, or that's virtual, not digital. All right. So Jake, once again, from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for your contribution, sharing your wisdom and your vast amount of knowledge with all of us. And I'm hoping that what this is going to be, and Angela, I won't unfriend you. I just got that message. But I really trust that not only will the 68 people on this call benefit from this, but also people will take it. And I'm going to encourage everybody to start having watch parties off the content, because the content of these Zooms are just amazing. So Jake, thanks so much, my friend.
Awesome. Hey, thanks so much, by the way. It's fun because we've been having these constant conversations, and it's an ever-evolving dialogue. And Lucas and I were speaking after the last opportunity we had last week about what we're doing and what we're seeing and where our team came from. And honestly, as crazy as this sounds, back in 2007, 2008, I got in the business in 09, in 08, 09. And when we go all the way back to that time frame, we had this little thing called the Great Recession. And the question that we started to approach ourselves with was, how do we communicate with our clients, and how do we help best help them through this process? So the first thing I really want us to understand is, in these types of markets, we show up as a guide, not necessarily as a salesperson. We show up as a teacher, not as a salesperson. And those of us who show up with the heart of a teacher, the heart of a guide, the heart of a director through this process, those are the ones that they're going to remember. Those are the ones that are going to win. It's those of us that show up as the used car salesman. Hey, everyone's got to buy a house. Everyone's got to sell a house. Is it you? That's the concept that we don't necessarily want to approach, especially in today's market, and it can get us in trouble. So what I'd like to do is spend some time really digging back into 08, 09 and talking about what those dialogues and those conversations were. First things first, give me an idea. I'm gonna look at the screen. How many of you were around in real estate in 2007, 8, 9, 10? How many of you remember it? So a handful of us. Awesome. So a couple things that I did at the very beginning of this, and you'll see in the chat, if you want to pull it up, there's a link to the SBA website. Now, this is all the COVID information. The reason this is important is many of our clients, many of our sphere have small businesses. We ourselves have small businesses, and we actually qualify for some of the assistance that's coming out. So number one, that's a link to hold on to. It's a link to pass out. Number two, make sure you have a great CPA, a great attorney, people that can help consult you through how to walk through that process. The employment protection piece is rolling out tomorrow, so be prepared because that will be ready for us tomorrow. Many of us on the market center side qualify for that. Many of us who have teams qualify for that, or other organizations. Many of our small businesses that we work with qualify for that. And this again is how do we be of service in this moment? The second one is a PDF with links, hyperlinks and stuff in it. This is one that we're sending out to our landlords and to our investors. This is one that my property management company is also sending out to our tenants today. So this is all based on Colorado and Denver. So be aware of that. However, those two pieces are huge resources that allow us to become that resource. The intention is simply this. 2-3 weeks ago, we started reaching out to our database at a high level. That was the encouragement. That was the challenge. And we started to do it. And the things that we pushed out with our team and we pushed out with others and the agents that we work with in the market centers was ask if you can call back in a couple of weeks. Just tell them, hey, you know what? Do you mind if I check in a couple of weeks just to make sure things are still good? And simply by asking that question, what it gave you the ability to do, the opportunity was to check back. By the way, have things changed between 2 weeks ago and today? Raise your hand if you think they have, right? So is it worth having that conversation? Is it worth reaching back out and just saying, hey, is everything still good? Has anything changed in the last 2 weeks based on our conversation from 2 weeks ago? Is there anything I could provide you with or support you with, right?
Jake, while you're coughing and catching your breath, there was one thing that I did want to jump in here and interject. If everybody on this call would go after this is over, and I'll put it in the chat, to kellercovered.com. Right now, and this, by the way, we don't get paid for this. However, you could call through your entire database. We know that every couple of $100 you save is actually going to go to the bottom line for you. You may want to just go to this particular site. It's going to walk them through getting their insurance quoted, but at the very end says, are you working with a Keller Williams agent? If they are, they get about a 15% discount on already discounted insurance rate. And if it works for them, it's great. If it doesn't, but just imagine the implications of calling your entire database, just saying, hey, listen, I don't get paid on this. I don't get a kickback. I don't get any kind of commissions on this, but this just is a pure service to you. You might want to take a look at this webpage. And if you have any questions, give me a call. It's just another thing of value as well. And investors too love this particular product because investors are tied to their insurance agents as a general rule. So wanted to throw that out there while you were trying to catch your breath. Helping you out, buddy.
And that's the key, by the way, is how do we provide these services that can help? The PDF is at the very top. I started that off. It's the COVID-19 Renter Resources is where you're going to find that. I'll have Lucas put that up in the files as well, so you all have access to it. Here's the thing. When we sat back, so a couple of things we looked at is we work a lot with investors. And one of the big changes that happened over the last week is all of a sudden Denver County came out and the mayor says, hey, we're not going to enforce evictions. Well, what does that mean, right? So it gave us the opportunity to have a conversation with our landlords about what did that mean? Did it mean you couldn't evict? Did it mean you couldn't start the process? Or did it just mean that the sheriff's department wasn't going to come and kick people out? Number one. Number two, how do we work with those tenants to keep them in place? Because the most expensive part of a landlord and having rental property is actually taking the tenant, moving a tenant out, and then paying to fix everything back up, and then having the property sit vacant for a month or two as you rent it back out. So there's some expenses there that are associated. So through the course of all of this, it was how do we wrap our arms around these folks that we've helped build this wealth in this portfolio? Here's what I want you to understand, and this is the biggest thing. When we go back and look at 2008, 2009, 2010, the people that got hurt the most economically got hurt because they were late to make a decision. I want you to hear that. They got hurt because they were late to make the decision, meaning they didn't have an advocate. They didn't have somebody who reached out and said, hey, let's have a real frank conversation about where you're at today. Let's have a real frank dialogue around what's going on in your finances, and let's talk about what the options are. And the reason why a lot of folks didn't have that conversation was because they were afraid, right? Many of us may be going through these same emotions right now with our own businesses, with everything else that's going on. We're used to being out, being social, having fun, seeing houses, and now we get to do it in a whole different format in front of a camera. And it's how do we adjust to this new world? It creates anxiousness. It creates a little anxiety. And through the concept, sometimes what happens is we either step into that role and we start to move forward quickly until we get exhausted, or we put our heads in the sand because of fear, because of the uncertainty that comes through that. And what we find is many of our clients had put their head in the sand through fear and uncertainty. They'd missed that first payment because they didn't know what to do, or they didn't know what the options were. And then they missed the second one, and then they missed the third one. And before you know it, they'd started down that path of foreclosure. And it was up to us to come in. And there was a lot of folks, I'll be real, one of my first conversations with a team leader / coach at the time was, hey, just go out and tell them they're behind on their mortgage because you saw it on the county records. I don't know if I want to do that. So what I decided to do is this, and this is something I would encourage us all to do. Put yourself in those shoes. If you're sitting in those shoes right now, if you're working in the restaurant industry, if you're working in the service industry, and right now you're not in a position where you may get your last paycheck this week, and you don't know what's going to happen on the other side of this, what are you experiencing? What are you feeling? Where are you going to go to get information? And what's available? You see, those pieces are what we've got to do. Not to put ourselves in their shoes and stay there, to understand what it is that they're getting access to, what it is that they're learning, what it is that they're seeing, so that then we can bring knowledge to the forefront and help them come out of fear. What we found in the day of 08, 09, 2010 is if you went and Googled foreclosure, like the first page and a half was all the horror stories, all the stuff that's going to happen, how it doesn't help, how you're just going to lose your house anyway. I mean, it was all those crazy things. Very rarely did you see anything of circumstance that could help people out. Today's the same way, right? You go Google forbearance and all the stuff that's working out with the mortgage companies right now, it's uncertain. You're going to see some people say, well, it doesn't work. It's actually a balloon note due after 4 months. Well, it does work. They tacked it onto the end of my mortgage, yada, yada, yada. And it creates uncertainty. Our job is to create certainty in an uncertain world as we walk through this. So when we sit down, what I want to walk through is simply this. Our job is to create certainty. Our job is to create knowledge. We do that through education. So how do we show up as the educator, as a knowledge base, to give them what they need? We would knock on those doors in 2008. 2009, and we would say, hey, look, I know you're in a tough spot, and there are 4 ways that you can actually keep your house. And I want to talk to you about the 4 ways you can stay in your house, not the one way that I'm going to help you get out of it. And everybody oh, there's 4 ways I could stay. Yeah. Now let's set an appointment later on tonight. Because by the way, that was our prospecting time. And we would come back at 9 o'clock at night and we would sit down with them and we would walk them through a model. So I'm going to show you what that model looks like, because many of our clients, even today, are on the precipice of walking down this path. Now, there's options available to them that weren't available back in 2008, 2009, and we'll talk about that as well. However, I want to help you understand what that model can look like. So I'm going to pull up the screen share real quick, and I'm going to draw a picture because I like drawing pictures. So bear with me as we draw a picture. So here's what we would do. We would take our folks and we'd say, hey, look, there's 4 options, right? So let's just box it out. Option number 1, you're starting to get late on your mortgage payment. Now, this is back in the foreclosure short sale days. However, it's still valid today. You start to become late on your mortgage payment. Here's the interesting part. Many people back then and even today say, okay, if I miss a payment, once we all get back to work, I'll make that payment up, right? And it was a story that was being told even there. So what they say is, hey, I'm going to come current. And that's a great option. Now, here's the truth. When you look at what's going on with forbearance, that would be a cone, like an ice cream cone. That would be awesome, by the way, right now on a cold, rainy day. So come current would be number 1. And with forbearance, some of the forbearance plans that are out there right now, what they're saying is, we'll give you 3 months. However, the 4th month is a balloon payment, meaning you have to pay those 3 months plus the current month. And if you don't, then it gives us the right to start the foreclosure process. So anytime you hear somebody talk about forbearance or missing a payment, number 1, the biggest thing we need to tell them to do is reach out to their servicer, whoever they're writing the mortgage check to. They've got to contact that servicer because their plan may be completely different. We've reached out to a handful of ours. We've got 7 mortgages for our rental properties. We've got our own primary residence. US Bank, Wells Fargo, Chase are all saying 3 different things. And that's our banks. So if that's what's happening, what could their banks be saying? We've heard everything from they're going to tack those 3 payments on at the end of the month, or at the end of the year, or at the end of the 30 years. Or the other thing we've heard people say is what they're going to do is give you a 12-month payment plan to come current on those 3 months. Now, here's the challenge. Anytime you're in a forbearance plan, and this is coming from the lenders that we work with, unfortunately, if interest rates drop to 2%, 2.5%, 3%, and you're in a position where you can refinance, maybe pull some cash out to take care of some debt, or in today's market, take advantage of the next opportunities, you're unable to do so while you're in a forbearance plan. So it's just another thing for people to know is if that's their intention, if they're seeing this as an opportunity on the other side, and you have the wherewithal to make that mortgage payment, make it. So again, come current, have the conversation with the forbearance piece. We'll talk a little bit more about that. What would happen? They may not be able to. Maybe they miss 2 payments or 3 payments, and before you know it, they've got to come up with $6,000 or $8,000, and they just don't have the ability. So what comes next is this little conversation called a loan modification. And even today, this still works. They're still available. You work it out through the mortgage company. They have to qualify with that mortgage company based on whatever terms and requirements they have. Sometimes they're extremely helpful. Sometimes they're not. Sometimes, honestly, they can come out worse out by doing that loan modification, and not everybody's going to qualify. So these are the 2 best conversations. Here's what would then happen. You fall behind, you get the notice of election and demand, which is basically them telling the county that they're going to file for the foreclosure so they can get the deed back, because now they want the collateral for the mortgage. There's a lot of things that happen in there. Back then, people were upside down, which meant the difference between what they owed and what the bank was able to recover could be filed as a collection against them. Today, many of our clients have equity. Many of our sphere has equity. So what they're actually going to end up doing is giving up some of that equity, a substantial portion of it, to buy a few months. Not to mention the fact that it could crush their credit. So if they got to that point, here's your other option. And this is where I would tell you, go find a great bankruptcy attorney that understands what we do. You can either declare a Chapter 7 or a Chapter 13 bankruptcy. Again, I'm not the bankruptcy attorney. Laws change all the time. Find a good attorney that understands both bankruptcy and how it works with real estate. Based on the circumstances, based on the amount of equity in the property, based on how it's structured and set up, a 13 might be more appropriate than a 7. It's just knowing that this is your next option. And then the worst case scenario, and this is exactly how we walk them through it, is we take them all the way down into the conversation of selling the house, right? Worst case scenario, we could help you sell, which would bring everything current, get everything taken care of, and then you're able to walk away from it. Or if you're upside down, then it would be a short sell. We would help work through that process, help you with the negotiations, and do our best to create the best outcome possible, which would be a forgiveness of the debt, et cetera, et cetera. This conversation still works today. What I wanted to give you was a framework for it, because it's not about saying, let me sell your house to save you. It's about slowing the conversation down to figure out where they're at in this thought process and dialogue, and then give them proper advice and guidance and connect them with the right counsel to make those proper next decisions. So how do we get to this point? Because here's the reality. What we're being told and how we're having the conversations is you're calling up your database and you're saying, hey, how are you? How are things going? How are you handling this whole thing? How's it feel to be a homeschool teacher? I mean, I'm working in the basement this morning and I got 5 kids. One's in college and he's doing his stuff upstairs in now his new dorm room, which is his bedroom. I've got 4 kids that are doing their homeschool stuff at the homework table in the living room, and chaos reigns. And I go upstairs and ask the teacher what's going on. And my wife says, you want to be the teacher? So understand that that's what's going on in a lot of our houses, and that's what's moving. We've got to help them come out of that chaos. We got to help them find that opportunity. So here's the concept and here's the dialogue. We can ask them, hey, how's it feel to be a home teacher? How are your kids going? I've got a daughter who's a senior in high school right now. How's that working? Let's connect emotionally, right? We got a handful of clients that also have daughters and sons who are seniors, and their biggest concern and their biggest fear right now, as crazy as it sounds, they used to complain about how boring it was to go through a graduation ceremony, and now that's all they want to make sure they do is get that diploma. They used to make fun of getting all dressed up for prom, and now they're upset because they don't have that opportunity. How is that really impacting them? Right? It's just slowing that conversation down. So no, this is just a dialogue, a format to have a conversation. That's all that is. And as we come into it, understand that our next question is, how do we become that trusted advisor? How do we build that trust through those conversations? And it's a simple dialogue, right? So let's work through that just a little bit, because how do you get from everything's great to everything's not great? Because here's the challenge. We as humans, if I were to bump into anybody in the street and I'd say, hey, how are things going? Actually, I wouldn't bump into you in the street because none of us are out. However, if I were to hit you on Zoom or shoot you a text and I'd say, how are things going? We're naturally programmed to say, oh, everything's great. Everything's awesome. It's not like us to go, man, can I tell you how sick of being locked in my basement in front of bright lights for 5 hours a day on Zoom calls is? I need to get out. I need to find a place to go run. I've got to, you know what I'm saying? It's not normal for us to have that dialogue, to complain because of our personalities. Most of our clients don't do the same. So you ask them how they're doing and they're going to say, hey, things are good. Or we're in there, we're hanging in there. How do you take it from hanging in there and things are okay to that next layer? And honestly, I'm going to give you some coaching conversations around it. The first thing we do is it's what we call keyword backtrack. So if they say things are okay, you say, awesome. So tell me more about it. What's okay? So you go back and you use their word and bring it into the question. What's okay? Tell me more about that. Well, you know, I mean, we're working through the homeschool thing and we're doing this and we're doing that. And, you know, I mean, we're surviving. Yeah, I know that feeling, surviving, I tell you. Well, are there any things you're concerned about as we walk into these next 3 or 4 or 5 weeks? And now you're getting into the heart of it with 3 questions. And you just have to be willing to accept what they say. Non-judgmental, there is a servant. And they may say something as simple as, you know what, my biggest concern, I just can't figure out how to do the homeschool thing. I just can't. And you say, awesome. What could I do to help you? This or that or the other. Or they could say, you know what, my husband owns a Baskin Robbins shop. And right now nothing's happening. We had to let go of all our employees. Now you're getting real in this moment. Now you're getting to a point where you know how to have a dialogue, a conversation that's going to dig deeper. And then you get to say, well, can I just pick your brain a sec? Because if you're self-employed and this is what's happening in your business, how long are you prepared to take this, go down this process? I'm telling you, many of the folks that we worked with and counseled with back in 2008, 2009, had they had somebody that came to them in 07, 06, when all that started to happen and say, are you prepared to dig in right now? Have you chopped the budget? Have you taken a moment to really dig in and see how long you can get through this? Because those folks, if they would have had somebody to guide them through that process at that point, what they may have said is, you know what, I don't. Most of my equity right now is in my house. That's all I've got. So what are my options? And now you're going to that next conversation. So our job right now, early in this dialogue, before it's declared a recession, hope it doesn't happen, and yet if it is, whatever, is to have these types of conversations. I shared last week, we've got a client. So first things first, let's shed the whole concept that real estate doesn't happen right now. Because in 10 days, we put 7 homes on the market, put 6 under contract, and have not opened a single door. So real estate can be done and can be done at a high level. I know Brendan Bartik was on earlier this week. His team's doing the same thing at a high level. There's many of us out there that are having high success. So it's just, how do we now shift and pivot to make that work? And many of our listings, many of our sellers are coming through from these conversations. It's not that they want to sell, it's that they are looking at this saying, okay, this is my opportunity or this is my necessity. And many of our buyers are in positions where this is their opportunity or this is their necessity. They're being transferred in, they're coming from other jobs, their houses, their family's grown, or they're seeing this as a chance to go out and be one of 2 or 3 offers instead of 18 on that same property. So as we work through the conversation, we can help them. Here's the down and dirty of it. When we talk about what this conversation looks like, I'm going to take a look at my notes. And we help them move forward and help them come out of the fear. It's just simply taking the same 4-quadrant conversation and adapting it to today, right? Well, how much now, instead of diving straight into you're in trouble, what we're going to do is we're going to slow the conversation down and we're going to say, okay, well, if you were to give me a guess, how many months could you go if this didn't change? If exactly what our world is today stayed the way it is today, how long could you go? It may be 2 months, it may be 4 months, it may be 6 months. By the way, these are great questions for us to ask ourselves. as we walk through this, because when we go down that path, we also have to get real with ourselves. We're helping them get real. We had the same conversation with many of our investors. Last night, we did the same dialogue that I'm walking you through today. We had over 30 of our investors on the call. 30. And it was the same conversation. It was, how are you prepared to weather this storm? What happens in the event that 30% of our tenants are unwilling or unable to pay? Do we have a plan in place? Do we have an opportunity set up? Are we structured to be able to weather that storm? What does it need to look like? What are our options, and how are we going to work with them to make that happen? So it was all about laying out a plan, right? About helping them understand what was available to them through forbearance, if possible, what was available to them through the SBA, if possible, through emergency funding, what our tenants have available to them as well, so that we can help our tenants first, because the reality of it is the majority of the funding right now went to those tenants. It didn't go to the landlords. So how did the tenants get access to those funds? And that's what I posted for you earlier. Here's the interesting part. As we slowed the conversation down, what we found out was we had some landlords. So here's our main conversations, right? Some of our landlords had great cash reserves, no equity. They just bought their homes. They don't necessarily have a lot of equity that they could tap into. However, they've got great cash reserves, and they've got good cash flow as long as the tenant continues to pay. We had others who just drained their cash reserves to buy their most recent property. So now they're cash poor, property rich. They've got a handful of properties that they've bought over the last 7 to 10 years, and they've got the equity in place. Well, what's their option? We have others who have their primary residences, who have tons of equity in the primary residence, and they're cash poor. What's the option? So it was all about, how do we slow this conversation down, ask the right questions so that we can help them structure the right plan based on what they choose to do over the longevity. I'm going to pause for a second. So Susan says she's having Zoom meetings with women and small businesses and helping them by figuring out a plan for their own situation. 100%. Susan, you want to tell us a little bit more about how you're doing that and how that's working out? And I'm going to repost the information I posted earlier. Let me unmute you. Maybe. Oh, it's not working. Are you in a spot where you can? There you go. Now we got you.
And I'm not in Hawaii. I wish. So I had been making phone calls and actually having some conversations via Messenger on Facebook with some one of my vendor partners. And we were talking about basically what we're talking about, pivoting our business and what that looks like, and holding our monies accountable and that kind of thing. And she was like, wow, I wish I had something that, it was literally like an opportunity just dropped in my lap. She said, I wish that I had somebody that could sit down and have that conversation with. And I know that there's other business owners that are feeling the same way, because they're their own business and they don't have any, they don't know their options. They don't know, who they can talk about making a plan with. And I asked her, would you be interested in doing a Zoom meeting where we can all kind of mastermind and talk about each other's businesses and see how we can help each other? And she said, absolutely, hold on a minute. And she shot out a text message, and there were about 10 women that responded back and said, yep, I am all in about it. Tell me when. So I'm doing it tomorrow at 4 o'clock.
Awesome. And see, here's the other thing. This is one of the big ahas from my coaching my team, is we used to set appointments up in 3 or 4 days down the road. What we're finding with our sphere right now is we can get them on the phone. We have these great conversations, go through this process. We realize that they need some help, or at least some coaching through it. And we'll say, hey, do you have time in about 15 minutes so we can get face to face? Because what I'd like to do is walk you through this whole process and draw it out. and we'll draw it out just like I did for you, or we'll do it on a doodle pad or whatever. And yet by getting face to face, what we found is I don't need to set this appointment up in 2 days. I can set this appointment up in 15 minutes because they're available. Shoot them a Zoom link and you're rocking and rolling. It's really funny because then what happens is they go, you know what? I think I'm in a position where I want to get ready to buy. I want to buy an investment property right now. Awesome. We get them connected, and 15 minutes later, we're doing our buyer presentation. And they're signing. Again, all this happens super fast and expediently right now because it's the expectation. And all of a sudden, you know, we used to ask ourselves, how do we become the Amazon, right? Because everybody clicks and they have it delivered an hour later. How do we become that same type of service provider? And I think through this pivot, we're learning how to do that and become more efficient through that process. So this is kind of the big mindset behind what we're doing and why we're doing it. The challenge and the key is being willing to ask those questions to get a little deeper, to really understand what's going on financially in that world without being mean, right? Without saying, hey, FYI, are you broke? It's truly doing so with a heart. Hey, if this were to prolong, how long do you think you guys could hold on? If this were to prolong, are you concerned about your job? If this were to prolong, do you have the resources, the economic resources to do that? By the way, here's the other challenge. If somebody says, yes, I've got a bunch of money in my 401k and I can pull that, our answer in that moment needs to be stop and let's talk about that. Because those are protected funds. When we go back to that box and we talk about bankruptcy, those are protected funds in a bankruptcy. That was the other thing we saw a lot of people do in 08, 09. And even today, we're starting to hear it, is people saying, hey, I'm going to cash out of this 401k. Man, you just took a double hit. You just saw 30% of your 401k get wiped away in like a week. And now you're going to go sell it and pay taxes on top of it? Hold on. Let's find out if there's other options before you go down that path. And that's really what we're doing, is we're slowing down and being that financial consultant in this real estate world that we live in and operate in. So let's talk options. How does this conversation develop from top to bottom? So I'm going to roll through it. I'm going to just kind of skip around as we walk through. However, what we found basically is there's a handful of different types of or classes of clients, all right, in our sphere. We've got people who are house rich, meaning they've got a bunch of equity, and they're cash rich, meaning they've got a bunch of cash and capital that's sitting in reserves, that's ready. Awesome. Today, in today's environment, write it down, cash is king. Cash is king. So we're coaching and consulting them to hold on to their cash. Here's the other thing we're coaching and consulting them to do is if they got a ton of equity, go to your lender, investigate doing a home equity line of credit. There's no need to do a first unless their interest rates, you know, about 4%. Don't worry about refinancing. However, if you've got a bunch of equity, go look at doing a home equity line of credit right now. Prime rate is incredibly low, like 0, number one. And number two, if you've got a great job history, you've got great credit, you're going to get a home equity line of credit for a pretty low interest rate. And you only pay for on it if you use it. And the reason we instruct them to do that is because it's easy to get a home equity line of credit when you don't need it. It's hard to get a home equity line of credit when you do. Another way to put it is usually when you don't need it, you don't need it because you're employed, because you've got liquid reserves, because you're set. Usually when you do need it, it's because you're unemployed, you've now spent all your liquid reserves, and now you need access to it. So get it when you don't need it, so if you ever do need it, it's available, and it's available cheap. So that's one of the first things we'll coach them on. Here's the other reason why we tell them to do that, is because if this market does decline the way Gary believes it could, we may see a 10 or 12% drop in values. Here's what we're already starting to see. We had like 400 homes hit the market yesterday, almost 400 listings, and only half of them went under contract. we're starting to see more listings hit the market than homes go under contract for the first time in about 6 years. Awesome, because what we're going to finally see is some equilibrium in the market, which actually makes it easier for these buyers, investors to come in and pick up those opportunities instead of being one of 18 offers and fighting for the same thing. So we're telling them to hold on to their capital and hold on to their cash and prepare for that opportunity. So here's the next piece. If they're cash rich, house poor, meaning they don't have a whole lot of equity and yet they've got a bunch of cash. Number one, make sure the cash isn't 401k. It's not IRA type of funds, that it's true income that they can grab. And number two, what we're coaching them to do is to strip out their budget, literally just cut it. How quickly could you cut 20 to 30% of your budget right now? And by the way, many of us have already done this because we're being forced to stay at home. The coolest part about this, I was talking to my wife as we were going through our budget from last month, and I said, I have never seen money stay in our account as long as it stayed in our account lately. And it's because we're not eating out, right? We're not going to movies. We're finding other things to do that are substantially less expensive, go figure, at home. So I think a lot of folks can really cut out budget. And here's one thing I would tell them is it's not forever. It may be for 2, for 3, or for 4 months. It's not forever. It's just to get through this period and make sure that the cash reserve that you have, everything that you've set aside, will fit and last if you need it. I'm gonna look at the comments real quick. So many agents are afraid of doing Zoom calls, iPhone tours, etc., leaning into the new technology. As leaders, are we looking into how to get our agents up to speed and over there fast? You know, here's the fun part. Because our clients and our agents and our sphere are all operating this way at a high level, they're getting used to it. They're getting used to it. Just make sure you look presentable as you have that conversation, and don't worry about it. I mean, we've done we've done calls in the car. We've done calls pulled over on the side of the road. We've done calls professionally like this with the lights and the whole 9 yards and in a studio type of setup. It doesn't matter. The key is that you're present with your client, and you can be present without being physically present. The biggest thing I would say is if you have a fear about it, do it first with your family. Reach out to your family, set up a Zoom call. One of my MCAs, her kiddo had his birthday yesterday. Well, she's got family all over the world. She's from France. Her dad's up in Canada. She's got family here. So they did a big Zoom birthday party for him last night. And if you're not familiar with the technology, get together with a group of friends, maybe do a happy hour, host it, have some fun. And that way you can start to play with it and see how it works, right? Let's take another look at what we're missing here. Get over it. Yes, that's always the case. Here's the cool part. I mean, when you download a new app onto your phone, do you know what the app says? Do you know, have you ever used it? A banking app, you name it, right? And the key is you may not be familiar with it. However, you figure out how to use it by playing with it. I knew how to log into Zoom. I knew how to be a part of a call. I had no idea how to direct it. So love all the guys, the agents that jump on my calls with our market center on Friday afternoons, because you're my guinea pigs. We do breakout rooms, we do mastermind rooms, we do all sorts of stuff now. And it's just to see how it works. And as you get more familiar with the technology, you realize it works out well. I'll have Lucas post the PDFs in the files, so you'll have access to them there if you can't find them here. They're up above if you need to find them. Can someone please email to? Okay, gotcha. Do I put makeup on? Do I put makeup on for the call? No. So here's a fun part. Zoom actually has a feature that makes your face look better. It's actually got a feature that you can go in. I can't remember what it's called. However, it's a touch-up feature that makes this look a little younger. Doesn't make me look like I have 5 kids and all that fun stuff. So there's all sorts of cool things you can do with the technology. Yes, our first graders are now using Zoom at a high level. My kids use Zoom for school right now. They're doing it with Hangouts. They're doing it through all sorts of different resources. And it's really, really cool. So it's just a matter of having some fun with it. When we're helping people work through how long can you make it? How long should we help them plan for? That's from Jody. Great question, Jody. I let them pick the time frame. I'll start with, hey, you know, we're going to be in this environment at least through the end of April. Are you in a position where you can make that work? And oh, by the way, if it goes further out, are you in a position? And they may ask, well, how long? It could be this, it could be that. I say, what if it happens? What if it lasts another 60 days? What things need to look like? How do you get a fun background? That's in the virtual piece on Zoom as well. You can download all sorts of fun stuff. And it's just, what do you look like, right? What does it look like to? It's just, it's being willing to, a lot of us aren't willing to ask those questions because they're uncomfortable questions to ask, or we don't want to know the answer to those questions, if that makes sense. Because if we do know the answer and we don't know how to help them, then that may also cause a challenge. So what I'm going to challenge you all to do is get deep and get down and get dirty. Do it with yourself first. Do it with your spouse first if you're married, your significant other, so that you all can get on the same page. And then you know how to coach your clients through it. If you're looking for resources, there's some great budgeting resources out there. You've heard me say that a lot. There's great budgeting resources out there. There's a budgeting resource available through MAPS Business Coaching. There's a budgeting resource available through MAPS. There's a budgeting resource available if you go to a million other spots. However, here's what we just need to get down to. What do we have to have? What are the nice to haves? And what's the frill? Get rid of the frill right now. Get down to the have to. Hang on to some of the nice tos. Just make them simple and have fun. And that's what we've been coaching all of our clients to really look at and do. So you've got cash rich, house poor, meaning not a lot of equity. Okay, how do we build your budget to make this last as long as possible? That becomes the conversation. Is how do we build this to make it last as long as possible? Take the next step. What if you are cash poor and house rich? Meaning you got a ton of equity, yet you don't have a whole lot of cash, and you might find yourself in some financial instability right now. That's where we go to the home equity line of credit. That's where we go to, what's your mortgage at today? What if we were to help you get in connection with KW, with Keller Mortgage, do a refinance, time it right, miss 2 mortgage payments, and get you a lower rate along with some cash out to pay off some of that additional debt and create some cash flow, right? To put that cash aside. The temptation when you have that cash and you pulled it out is to pay off the cars and to pay off this and pay off that. And right now, what I would suggest is you take the cash, if you get it, and you set it in a bank account that you don't touch unless you need it. And that's it. And so we help them prepare through that process. Again, what gets people in trouble in these markets is they don't have cash. They just don't have the cash and the capital to get through it. Brooke says, I cried when I printed my accounts and went through them line by line, but I was able to save, cut out nearly $1,400 a month in expenses between personal and business budgets. Weed it out. 100%. 100%. My wife and I, the first go around, we cut about 23% out of our budget. We went through again a week later, about a week and a half later, once we kind of got used to that new normal, and we cut out another 12% out of the budget. Now we're in the process, because we've got a ton of equity in our primary home, of doing a refinance, pulling the additional capital out for 2 reasons. We're going to pay off some of our cars and some debt, and then we're going to shove the rest of that capital aside and hold on to it, because we buy a bunch of rental property. We've got over 40 rental properties right now. So if our tenants aren't able to make those payments, we want to be able and willing to cover it. And if they are able to make them and we come out ahead, we want to be able to get to a point where we can start to invest. So cash poor, house rich. However, equity is not available due to jumbo loans being too new. Yes. So here's the fun part. What if you're cash poor, house rich, and you can't access it because lending requirements have changed substantially every 12 seconds. That's where we go in, and we've got several clients right now. This is what they're doing. We've asked them, what's their goal, right? If you could say, hey, when do you want to retire by? I know it's hard to think about right now. And yet if you could say, in a perfect world, I want to be able to stop working at this point. I want to have enough capital coming in, cash coming in, where I don't have to work anymore. What would it be? And a lot of our clients who are in their 50s and 60s, they're saying within 5 years. And then they're seeing this, and what's happened lately is a big drawback. And now they're thinking they're going to have to work for an extra 5 or 10 or 12 years to be able to get to that point. Here's what we're selling them. What if you take your jumbo property, your nice house, and you take that $500,000 or $600,000 in equity, we sell it. We help you rent something smaller, simpler today. You pay 6 to 12 months up front in rent, so you don't have to worry about it. And that helps you weather the storm. By the way, if you pay 6 to 12 months, most landlords will give you some type of break. And then you sit on your cash. And as we start to turn this corner, now we help you go reinvest that capital into the investment properties, into the fourplexes or the duplexes, into other aspects and other resources where you're going to be able to now to make that work. We've done this now for 3 folks already in the last 2 weeks. And what we found is that what they thought was a 5-year plan is turning into a 3-year plan. We've got some of them that are saying, you know what, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to buy a 4-plex when we get out of this. I'm going to live in one of the units, which means I can buy at FHA financing, limited down payment. And then I'm going to take the other cash and I'm going to go buy 2 or 3 other 4-plexes on top of that, because now I still have a ton of my capital available, and I just picked up 12 to 16 units in a year. And what they thought was going to take them years because of this circumstance actually helped them expedite that process and make it faster. Now, is that right for everybody? No. However, it's helping them understand if we're cash poor, we got a ton of equity and yet we can't access it because of the loan balance size being jumbo or exceeding the $510,000 amount, then we've got to look at other options. And by the way, those homes, those expensive homes, tend to be the first ones to start to fall back. Not the $2.5 million, the $3 million, that's all luxury money. We're talking the folks who could barely make the $1.2 million payment, yet they bought the $1.2 million house because they wanted to live like a millionaire, even though they could barely afford it. Those are the homes that now are going to be worth $800,000 in the next 12 months. Okay, 800, that might be a huge drop. However, you know what I'm saying. Those are some of the first ones to get impacted. So we've got house rich, cash rich, house poor, cash, blah, blah, blah. So now we got the worst of all, right? Now you're cash poor and house poor, and you're concerned about your job. Those are the folks that were saying, hey, time out. Let's talk about forbearance. The government's come out and said this is an option. This is a plan that we can utilize. However, here's what you need to be aware of. There's no set outcome. They just said that go give it to them. It's not going to impact their credit. That you can't require it. You can't report it on your credit. So that's a huge benefit to our clients. And they never gave them terms on how the outcome had to be handled. So this is where it becomes important, where we either join them on that call or they have the conversation and we teach them the questions to ask. And then they do not miss a payment until they have it in writing what the agreement's going to be. So we're coaching our clients through this entire process so that they have power, they have knowledge today. And then at the end of all of it, we slow down and say, hey, where do you find yourself? Where, based on what we just talked about, what do you think is your next best step? And we let them pick that next best step. And then we just become that assistant. We help them process that next best step. If their next best step is to hold tight, I'm just going to hunker down. We're going to cut everything out of our budget. And we're going to sit tight as long as we can. Awesome. Do you mind if I call you in 2 weeks just to check in? Nope. Give me a buzz. Now we've got another phone call, right? By the way, based on how quickly we're getting new information, could we have new opportunities that show up over the next 2 weeks because we've been paying attention? So that's our opportunity. Number two is, how do we now slow the process down and say, okay, you want to do forbearance? Great. When are you going to have the time to reach out to the bank? And when can I call and follow up with you to see what the outcome was? And now we're going to guide them through this process and be their guide. You want to sell your home today? Great. Give me 15 minutes. I'll prepare the paperwork. I'm going to send it over. We'll do a Zoom call and we'll walk through the entire process. And then let's talk about what you want the outcome to look like. We're not talking about selling the house. What we're focused on is, where do you want this to go? What's the outcome you desire at the end of this whole process? And let's pick your destination as we walk through it. And we're helping people find hope and walk away from fear. So I'll type up the questions that I was walking through so you guys have them. I'll send that over to Lucas so we can add it to the files. What are your ahas from today? What are you taking away from this, as we've got about 5 minutes left? You can type them in the chat. You can.
I'm totally intimidated by you, Jake.
I tell you, it happens.
Well, one of the things you started off with, I mean, if you don't start doing something now, and you wait till later, it's going to be too late. Make a decision now on what you're going to do. Not just, yes, for me, make a decision now what I'm going to do, but be ready to explain that on your care calls as well, to let them know, hey, they have options. It's not too late to do it now. However, 30 days could be too late.
100%. Well, and those that made quick moves back in 08, 09 are the ones that became the millionaires today. Because they left and had that access to that equity and that capital to take advantage of that time, right?
Jake, this really, and as I've been listening to this, all the things you're saying is, I hope everybody hears very clearly, this is not the time to be on vacation. This is the time when professional realtors really need to emerge, double up your activities, double up your contribution. What Jake just did, I would study. He gave you a path to wealth there, real honestly. I would learn and master this conversation, because we're heading into a season that realtors that are saying, you know what, I think it's going to be okay. Like, I've got a lot of my market centers in Kansas City, and Jake's been there in my market centers as a bold instructor. And a lot of people in Kansas City think this is just going to be okay at the end of next month. It might be, it might not be. Kansas City is pretty optimistic, and, little house on the prairie, and, and I get it. But I'm going to prepare as if the bottom's going to fall out, and I'm armed to go to war for the sake of my clients. And right now, it's not the time to sit at home and do nothing. You're doing, by the way, being on this call is one step. Double down on your education. Never, ever, no, not ever cut out coaching right now. This is not the time to be without a coach. You need somebody that can navigate this part of the river. And people say, but I got to cut my expenses. That coaching is never, I spend more than probably anybody on this call in coaching. I can't afford not to have a coach. Just like Jake, I'm looking at my money. It's like, okay, there's big percentages, a lot of money that's going out right now, potentially could go out. Guys, it's time to really step up and be pros. And for those who hear what Jake just said and taught and what we're talking about, this is the opportunity for you to go be disruptive to your people and really show up at a high level. And it's going to be an opportunity for some people to go get jobs at Burger King and McDonald's, and that's awesome. And I just don't know that anybody on this call is called to flip burgers. I don't know. Jody Walker kind of looks like a burger flipper to me.
I'll tell you this. Those of us that step up and master this conversation at the highest level, we're going to put in a ton of work and effort today that may not show results for 90, 120, even a full year down the path. However, we're going to set ourselves up and our clients up for lifetime relationships where they're bringing you Christmas gifts because you were the partner that walked them down this path of wealth.
That's right. And ultimately, it's about transforming lives and helping people at the highest level. And people that are sleeping right now aren't going to be positioned for that. The people who are stepping up right now are going to be positioned for that. So my job as the regional director in Colorado is to make sure you're armed to be that person. Does that make sense? Cool. So what we'll do is we'll post this and all the files that Jake has on my public page. I know that during this call, I got 15 friend requests. And I'm like, oh gosh, now I got to go pick 15 people that I don't like, or 15 people and take them off my Facebook. But go like my public page, just not Angela Thompson, just not Angela Thompson. So go like my public page, and I will post this once Zoom takes a little bit for it to process. Jake, you're a pro. Your heart of contribution is amazing. You're just an amazing human being as well as a great leader. So thank you, my friend.
Thank you. What I'll do after that's posted is I'll go into the chat, the comments, Lucas, and I'll type in a handful of the questions that I threw out because I know I went through them really quick. So
okay, very good. All right, guys, have a very productive day. We'll talk to you soon. Proud of you.
Thanks all.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.